I'm Richard Hefner, your host on The Open Mind, and my guest today is a much-honored physician, gerontologist, and psychiatrist whose Pulitzer Prize-winning book on being old in America begins this way. Old age in America is often a tragedy. Few of us like to consider it because it reminds us of our own mortality. We are so preoccupied with defending ourselves from the reality of death that we ignore the fact that human beings are alive until they are actually dead. At best, the living old are treated as if they were already half dead. And because we primarily associate old age with dying, we have not yet emotionally absorbed the fact that medical and public health advances now make it possible for millions of older people to be reasonably healthy.
You know, it's interesting. In the nearly 25 years since that book was written, we've had a 50% reduction in deaths from heart disease and stroke. We've had significant drops in disability rates, so that happily, despite the mass production of old age, despite the fact that centenarians are the most rapidly growing age group, we have a more vigorous, healthy, less disabled group of wonderful older people who are contributing. And since they're contributing, we really do have to think through these casual statements about, quote, how unaffordable they are. Can we afford older people? People ask. Will there be a stagnation of the economy as a consequence of older people? Will we have intergenerational conflicts? Will there be a gerontocracy, too much power in the hands of older people? They're all answerable questions, but it does indicate what you said. It's extraordinarily serious, this attack, really, upon the reality of survivorship.
And where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here is to always be concerned about a fair allocation of resources, but I think psychologically and humanistically we have to keep in mind that today's children will one day be older people, and today's older people are once children. There's a unity and a continuity to life, which we must bear in mind. And when we are negative towards old age, we're slashing our own tires. This is really our own future we're talking about.
Doctor, what do you mean by a fair distribution? How could there be anything fair about saying, well, 50% perhaps goes here and 50% goes there, if neither one is enough?
Well, we always depend upon productivity of a society. If we don't have prosperity, if we don't have productivity, if the pie gets tight, then it's, of course, very difficult. But so long as we have certain resources, then we have to distribute them in a way that probably comes about as a result of the general will of that body of people, of that society. If you look at families individually, we know in America the family protects its older members. It is not true that American families abandon older people, that they do not respond to them when they're ill or impaired. We do. So if we were to write large what we do on a family basis for the community as a whole, I think we'd have a reasonably fair allocation of resources.
Now, given the whatever inequality there is now, and it is growing
massively,
what do you see as what is going to happen in terms of the medical progress that you attribute to the past quarter century?
Well, we're already seeing it happen. You know, in many community hospitals, big public city hospitals, people are not getting the care that those of us who are more fortunate are getting. We have subtle, covert rationing already. We have, in my judgment, a kind of passive euthanasia already occurring, in which people die simply because they do not have the resources available to them. We see it in prisons, we see it out of prisons, in the black community, and in a variety of other settings in the United States. I think we get caught up in kind of what's immediately in front of our own nose, our own immediate survival, our day-by-day activities, and we really find it very hard to look far ahead. I guess I'd have to say that since 1955, I think that's about 43 years that I've been in the field of aging, the single biggest enemy has been denial.
You have said, and I know that the project makes the point too, and you have written that if we pay more attention to the suffering at the end of life that exists and alleviate it, there will be less of a problem with this question of physician-aided suicide.
I think so. I mean, there may always be, you know, the most tragic of situations, someone that has what some call a locked-in syndrome, where they have no control over their body whatsoever, but they're fully conscious, or and they may give signals as best they can through eye movements that they would wish their life were ended. I can imagine with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, popularly called Lou Gehrig's disease, that at certain points people feel they want to end their lives, and I can understand and respect that. But for the vast majority, probably as much as 98% of people, if we could assure them that they would get decent resolution of pain and other physical discomforts and some sense of appreciation of their inner life, I think people could accept that, and they would not be interested in physician-assisted suicide. Amazing often is when you work with patients, even those who have extraordinary impairments, cling on to life. Life is very precious. People are not ready to give it away, as long as they have some sense of some potential quality of life. Now, that quality of life will vary individual by individual. Perhaps you want to see a granddaughter who you helped finance through college graduate that June, or be at their wedding. So those extra days or extra months that might get you there through some life-extending technology becomes very important. For someone else, they may not have that particular endpoint.